Welcome to the FanDuel running back analysis for week 5. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Justin Elick at Big Italy 42. Taking a look at cash, GPP, and value running backs this week that you wrote up. And I'm on all these guys. I think this is a good week because there's a lot of different balanced options you can go with. And you and I were talking before that we do like kind of paying up at wide receiver and kind of taking a look at the mid and kind of bottom tier for running backs.
Yeah, absolutely. But the one guy that I guess a couple guys in the upper echelon that we feel good about. Obviously, Le'Veon Bell, even with the tough matchup, you could play him, but not a cash game guy for me. DeMarco Murray has just been very, very good. I mean, finally, the one time we see them in a good game script last week where they're ahead late, he got 25 carries, 2 targets. He's had 7, 7, 5, and 2 targets. Caught just about every pass. He's had receptions on all but 2 targets he's seen this year. He's had 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, at least 95 yards rushing each time. And, you know, this is a guy that is 8,400, second most expensive back on the board on FanDuel, but facing a Miami defense that, you know, is for some reason people tend to think that this is, you know, a solid defense against the run, but Football Outsiders definitely disagrees with that. They're sitting there at 12th against the run, which I think is kind of a misleading number when you factor in the running backs that they've faced. This isn't a team that's faced a top-tier running back, and DeMarco Murray is the entire offense for Tennessee because Marcus Mariota can't even get the ball to his tight end. So he's just going to keep seeing a ton of touches, and he's safe. And, I mean, as you see, he gets looks in the red zone too, so he's got big upside.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a floor, I don't think it gets much better than DeMarco Murray right now. And it's finally, I mean, he's priced up this week, but I think he's definitely worth it. He's earned that. And as you mentioned, I mean, Tennessee, it's so focused on basically 2 guys. And right now, Delaney Walker's not even doing anything. So it basically has been the DeMarco Murray show. Melvin Gordon, you talk about next going up against the Raiders, 7,700. I like him as well. He's just been continuously crushing. And, you know, it took me a little bit to see what his floor was going to be, but I mean, we know what it is now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that pretty much is the only option in the running game, and it's the only consistent option in the offense. And he's had 20 touches, 20 carries inside of the red zone already this year, converted 6 of those into touchdowns. And inside the 10, he's got 90.9% of the team's rushes, and that includes, you know, week 1 plus a couple minutes while Danny Woodhead was still there. And I'm fairly certain that Woodhead was the only other one that got a touch inside the red zone out of the backfield. So, you know, this is a guy that just owns the red zone. The Chargers somehow, with all these, you know, subpar weapons all over the place, just continue to get into the red zone and score points. And you just know when they get inside the 5, it's going to be Melvin Gordon getting the touches. You know, even with Hunter Henry caught a touchdown last week, Antonio Gates, I guess, is still alive. Sometimes he plays, but I mean, he's not a factor anymore. And I mean, the Chargers are realizing that's their best bet inside the 5-yard line. So once it gets down there, this is a guy that doesn't really need to have huge totals on the ground. Almost had identical numbers the past 2 weeks. 35 yards on the ground and 43 yards through the air 2 weeks ago. Last week, 36 yards on the ground and 43 yards through the air. 15.8 and 20.9 fantasy points. So if he can turn in the 45 touches that he's had over the last 2 weeks into some more yardage, I mean, we already know what his floor is, but this is a guy that certainly has a pretty nice ceiling too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, the yards per carry hasn't really been efficient for Gordon, but you look at this, it could kind of even out against this Raiders defense who allowing over 5.1 yards per attempt.
Yeah.
So GPPs, you're going down here to 6,200 with Jerick McKinnon. Kind of a perceived tough matchup, but you really don't think it is.
No, I mean, McKinnon is a guy that we always have kind of cringed over the past couple of years when Adrian Peterson is hurt because, as we know, Matt Asiata is quite possibly the worst football player on the planet, if you ask me. He's just big, and that's all he is. But, you know, when you got a guy of his size at the goal line, I understand why you give him the ball. But encouraging that we saw McKinnon get a touchdown, 4-yard carry last week. Asiata still did steal one of his touches, but McKinnon looked good in that matchup last week. He got 18 carries out of the backfield, 85 yards and a touchdown. Got targeted 5 times, only caught 3 for 10 yards. But that was against the Giants, who, you know, thus far this season are one of the better defenses against the run, 5th according to Football Outsiders. So now he faces a Houston team, no J.J. Watt, really nobody in that front 7 that's gonna, expect to make a big play there. They're 30th against the run, according to Football Outsiders, 5th against the pass. So there's an easy game plan for beating this team, and it's running the football. And fortunately, Minnesota doesn't really have much of a passing game anyway. Stephon Diggs banged up. I looks like he's unlikely to even play at all this week. So I'm expecting McKinnon to get 20 plus touches easily because they've got no other options. Even Kyle Rudolph is banged up and questionable.
Yeah, definitely. He could be a focal point of the offense even more so this week. And I mean, we know Bradford doesn't throw the ball downfield anyway. He likes a lot of those dump off passes, which kind of helps McKinnon out. You talk about him being GPP. I mean, is he kind of borderline cash as well at the price?
Yeah, I mean, with seeing, Diggs being, I believe it was unlikely to play as of this morning, and Rudolph looks like he might play, but probably won't be 100%. I mean, this is a guy that has kind of moved into cash consideration for me. So, yeah, Diggs, it's Friday, did not practice today. So Mike Zimmer said he doesn't believe, or he believes that he's going to try to play, but, I mean, you're not practicing on Friday. Usually that means you're not playing on Sunday. And even if you are, you're not 100%. So I think he's in the last couple of days moved into cash game for me at that price.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. CJ Anderson, you talk about here next, 8K. He kind of seems to always be the forgotten guy. I mean, I never really see his ownership too high in most contests. And at a price tag that's around some other options with all the wide receivers, I think you're going to get him at pretty low ownership here.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta's a bad defense. They're 30th against the pass, 25th against the run. And, kind of some uncertainty as to who's going to play quarterback this week for Denver, whether it's Lynch or Simeon. I don't think it particularly matters which one of them is under center. Anderson, due to the fact that he hasn't really produced over the past 2 weeks, I think he's going to be, much lower owned than he should, especially because he's priced up near guys like Murray. But still getting, 20 plus touches in 3 out of 4 games so far this year. Has a touchdown in 3 of those 4 games. Hasn't been heavily involved in the pass game last couple of weeks, but, I expect that Denver is going to be up in this game because of their defense like they usually are. And I expect Anderson's going to see his 20 plus touches. And obviously he's not the only Denver player I want exposure to, but I think he's going to go lower owned, especially with the way that we've seen Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders performing recently.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. In terms of value, Jordan Howard jumped up in price, but in comparison to kind of some of the other guys, 7,200 in this matchup still isn't a bad price.
No, I mean, Jordan Howard looked really good last week, and he's a guy that I can't remember who sent out the tweet, but I saw one this morning. I'll have to try to find it. I might have retweeted it, but it said that he forced 7 missed tackles last week, and Jeremy Langford forced 10 all of last season. Obviously, he didn't play, every down, every game even, but, that's still a pretty telling stat that Jordan Howard, as a young running back who really doesn't have much experience, his first game was a full workload, 23 carries for 111 yards, caught 3 or 4 targets for 21. He didn't get in the end zone, but, a lot of that's due to the fact that this is just not a good Bears offense, and they're even more banged up this week. But as you well know, and we've said every week, Colts, one of the worst defenses in the league, much like Atlanta, bottom 10, really bottom 5 in pretty much every stat, 29th against the pass, 26th against the run, especially with guys like Eddie Royal, Zach Miller, Alshon Jeffrey, all banged up, Kevin White on the IR now. I mean, you're going to rely on your young running back who looks consistent already. So I think he's going to see just a ton of touches, and I think he's a safe option as well. I don't know that he has huge upside because, it's still a team that would rather pass the ball. Brian Hoyer's not back there to hand it off all the time, but I think he's still a pretty safe option.
Yeah, I definitely do too. I mean, and especially if all those wide receivers are banged up, and I mean, we saw Eddie Roy. I don't know if he practiced today. Zach Miller's is, has an issue. Kevin White already on the IR. I mean, they might hand it off 20 plus times to Howard. Just the overall thing is game flow. I mean, that could dictate kind of how they use him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrence West, we talked about here, 6,400. We saw him last week be, excelled in a lead role. Kenneth Dixon coming back, but as you pointed out, I'm in agreement that you don't expect him to really be split carries. It's just more, the occasional rest, and he'll get in there.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Forsett got cut for it seems like the 50th time this season already. That just didn't work out. Obviously, West is a guy, like you said, performed really well last week in a solid matchup against Oakland. Now he gets an even better matchup against the Redskins that have been outside of Oakland. quite possibly the worst defense in the league. I mean, 32nd against the run. They've been horrible, pretty bad against the pass also, 18th. So, this is a guy that I don't think Dixon takes more than 7-8 carries from him. And, this is Joe Flacco, Steve Smith, and really nobody else. Mike Wallace had a couple touchdowns early, but he's not a consistently reliable option. So, I think he's still going to get the workload, and I still think he's going to get the goal line carries. And, you're hard pressed to find a better matchup than this. I mean, they got gashed last week by Isaiah Crowell, who apparently is one of the best running backs in the league by like every metric and every grading system. But obviously he's not actually. This is just a really, really good matchup.
Yeah, it definitely is. I like him a lot. Any other value backs? I know we had some injury news and some things kind of shift around if you want to touch on to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, DeAndre Washington, if he ends up getting the start for Latavius Murray this weekend, I mean, he's only $4,700 on FanDuel. Murray listed as questionable right now. Didn't practice Thursday. They're saying we'll wait and see. We hope he can play, things like that. Those are the type of things that make me believe that, he's not going to be, even if he's playing, he's not going to be a big factor. And he really hasn't been a big factor recently anyway. 14 carries week 1, but the last 3 weeks, 8, 10, and 8. So, this isn't a guy that's really dominating the touches in the backfield anyway. So if he can't play, I think that Washington's going to all of a sudden be one of the top value plays in the week.
Yeah, definitely do. I mean, especially at that price. I mean, that it's almost a DraftKings-like price. I mean, you don't really usually see that type of value on open up on FanDuel like that. So that's going to wrap things up with the FanDuel backfield for this week. Be sure to head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com, check out our great tools and content.